Captain Zara Chen stared out at the endless stars from the bridge of the New Horizons. The ship moved quietly through space, its engines humming softly as they traveled between systems. It had been 3 months since they last saw another vessel, and Chen liked it that way. The galaxy was peaceful now, and she preferred the silence of empty space to the busy traffic lanes near the core worlds. "Captain, we're picking up something interesting," said Lieutenant Torres from his station. "There's a solar system about 2 light years ahead. Looks like it has several planets that might support life." Chen nodded and walked over to look at the scanner readings. This was what they did now: explore empty space, map new systems, and look for places where people might want to live someday. It was quiet work, safe work, nothing like the old days that her grandfather used to tell stories about. "Take us in for a closer look," she ordered, "but keep us at a safe distance until we know more." The New Horizons changed course, heading toward the unknown system. Chen returned to her captain's chair and thought about how much the galaxy had changed. 40 years ago, human ships like hers would have been bristling with weapons ready for battle at any moment. Now her ship carried scientific equipment, food supplies, and tools for building colonies. The weapons locker held only basic defense systems, nothing that could threaten another ship. Everyone said humans had gone soft. The other species in the Galactic Concordat whispered about it in their council meetings. They remembered when human warships could destroy entire fleets, when human soldiers fought with a fury that scared even their allies. But those days were over. The last great war had ended 4 decades ago, and humanity had chosen peace. Chen's communication officer, Ensign Kim, looked up from her console. "Captain, I'm getting a message from the Concordat Council. They want to know our position and mission status." "Tell them we're exploring the Outer Rim as planned," Chen replied. "Nothing unusual to report." This was the routine now. Check in with the Concordat, file reports about empty space, and stay far away from anything that might cause trouble. Most of the galaxy had forgotten that humans were once the most feared warriors in known space. They saw human ships doing peaceful work and assumed that was all humans were good for anymore. But Chen knew better. Her grandfather had served on the great warship Thunderstrike during the Altair campaign. He told her stories about battles that lasted for days, about human ships ramming enemy vessels when their weapons ran out of ammunition. He described the War Titans, massive human dreadnoughts that could crack planets open and make entire star systems surrender just by showing up. "Where are those ships now, Grandpa?" she had asked when she was little. "Sleeping," he had answered with a sad smile, waiting for the day when the galaxy might need them again. Chen had always wondered what he meant by that. When she joined the Human Space Service, she expected to learn about the old warships. Instead, she found herself assigned to exploration duty, mapping empty systems and filing reports that nobody seemed to read. Her training focused on diplomacy, scientific research, and peaceful contact with alien species. There was no mention of the legendary War Titans or the battles that had made humans famous across the galaxy. The years passed quietly. Chen worked her way up from ensign to lieutenant to captain, always on exploration ships, always staying far from trouble. She began to believe that maybe everyone was right. Maybe humans really had abandoned their warlike nature. Maybe the old stories were just that. Stories. The Galactic Concordat grew stronger during those years. 847. Different species worked together to keep peace across thousands of star systems. Trade routes connected distant worlds, and conflicts were settled through negotiation instead of battle. The Concordat had its own defense fleet, made up of ships from many different species, but they rarely had to fight anyone. Pirates and raiders had mostly disappeared, scared away by the threat of unified response from so many worlds. It was the golden age that everyone had dreamed of during the war years. No more massive battles that destroyed entire planets. No more refugee fleets fleeing from conquered systems. No more calls for help that came too late. The galaxy was finally at peace, and humanity seemed content to explore its quiet corners. "Captain," Torres called out, interrupting her thoughts. "We're getting detailed scans of that system now. 3 planets in the habitable zone, and 1 of them shows signs of water and a breathable atmosphere." Chen studied the data on her screen. The planet looked perfect for human colonization. The right size, the right distance from its star, the right mixture of gases in its atmosphere. In a few years there might be cities there, farms, schools full of children who had never heard of war. "Mark it in our files," she ordered. "We'll recommend it for colony consideration when we get back to base." This was the kind of discovery that made exploration worthwhile. Chen imagined families settling on that distant world, building homes, under alien skies growing crops in foreign soil. Their children would grow up thinking that space exploration was humanity's greatest achievement. They would never know about the sleeping war titans or the terrible battles their grandparents had fought. Maybe that was better. Maybe it was good that the galaxy had forgotten how dangerous humans could be when they were angry. Chen preferred mapping peaceful worlds to planning military campaigns. She liked filing reports about potential colonies instead of casualty lists from destroyed fleets. The New Horizons continued on its course, moving through the quiet darkness between stars. Chen's crew worked at their stations, cataloging stellar phenomena and searching for signs of life on distant planets. They were explorers now, not warriors. They carried hopes for the future instead of weapons of destruction. But sometimes, late at night when she couldn't sleep, Chen would think about her grandfather's stories. She would wonder about those sleeping war titans and the people who once crewed them. Were they really gone forever? Or were they just waiting like her grandfather had said? And if they were waiting, what would it take to wake them up? The questions stayed with her as the New Horizons sailed through peaceful space, carrying its crew of explorers toward whatever discoveries lay ahead. The galaxy was quiet, and Chen was content to keep it that way. She had no way of knowing that somewhere in the depths of space, that peace was about to be shattered by something terrible and new. For now, though, the stars were silent, and humanity slept the sleep of the peaceful, dreaming of colonies and trade routes instead of battles and conquest. The war titans remained hidden in their secret places, their weapons cold, and their crews dispersed to other duties. The galaxy had forgotten what humans were capable of when pushed to fight. Soon it would remember. The emergency signal came from Kepler 442b at 3 in the morning, ship time. Captain Chen was awakened by the urgent beeping of her personal communicator, a sound she had not heard in 5 years of peaceful exploration duty. "Captain, to the bridge," came Lieutenant Torres's voice tight with worry. "We're receiving a Concordat-wide distress call." Chen pulled on her uniform and hurried through the corridors of the New Horizons. Emergency lighting cast red shadows on the walls, making everything look like a scene from the old war stories. When she reached the bridge, her crew was already at their stations, faces grim as they listened to the transmission. "Play it back," Chen ordered, settling into her captain's chair. The voice that came through the speakers was broken, desperate. "This is Governor Martinez of Kepler 442b. We are under attack by unknown vessels. They appeared without warning and began firing on our cities. Our defense platforms are destroyed. We have maybe 6 hours before—" The transmission dissolved into static, then silence. Chen felt a chill run down her spine. Kepler 442b was an agricultural world, home to 3 million people from a dozen different species. It had no military installations, no strategic value, nothing that would make it a target for pirates or raiders. "When was this sent?" she asked. 14 hours ago, Torres replied. "It's been broadcast on all emergency frequencies, but we're the closest ship to respond." 14 hours. If the planet had 6 hours when the message was sent, then everyone on Kepler 442b was probably already dead. Chen stared at the star charts on her screen, trying to process what she was hearing. The Andorian sector had been peaceful for 20 years. No one made war there anymore. "Captain," said Ensign Kim from communications. "I'm picking up more signals, 3 other systems in the same area. All emergency broadcasts, all saying the same thing. Unknown attackers, complete destruction of defenses." Chen's blood turned cold. One attack might be pirates or raiders. 4 attacks in the same region meant something much worse. How many people live in those systems? Kim's fingers flew over her console, pulling up population data. Kepler 442b had 3 million residents. New Geneva had 8 million. Prosperity Station housed 2 million workers. Harrison's World had 5 million colonists. She looked up, with wide eyes. "Captain, that's 18 million people." The bridge fell silent. 18 million lives gone in a matter of hours. Chen had never seen anything like it, never imagined anything like it could happen in the peaceful galaxy she had known all her adult life. "Set course for the Andorian sector," Chen ordered. "Maximum speed." "Captain," Torres said carefully, "our ship isn't equipped for combat. If whatever hit those worlds is still there—" "We're not going to fight," Chen replied. "We're going to see what happened and report back to the Concordat Council." The New Horizons changed course, its engines pushing the ship faster than Chen had ever driven it. As they traveled toward the scene of the attacks, more reports came in from Concordat vessels. The first military ships to respond had found nothing, but empty space where thriving colonies used to be. No debris, no survivors, no trace that millions of people had ever lived there. Then came the reports that made Chen's stomach turn. The Concordat Battle Group Defender's Pride, 12 ships and 4,000 crew members had been sent to investigate. They found the attackers in the Kepler system, strange vessels unlike anything in Concordat databases. The battle lasted less than an hour. When it was over, all 12 Concordat ships were gone. Unknown attackers destroyed Admiral Singh's entire fleet, Kim reported, her voice shaking as she read the transmission. The aliens have ships that can phase through solid matter. Energy weapons don't affect them. They adapt to any attack pattern. Within minutes, Chen gripped the armrests of her chair. Admiral Singh had been a legend, a veteran of the last Great War with more combat experience than any living officer. If he couldn't stop these attackers, then the Concordat was in serious trouble. More battle groups were sent. The Silver Lance Flotilla, 18 ships strong, lasted 22 minutes. The Tau Ceti Defense Squadron, 30 vessels including 2 dreadnoughts, was destroyed in 37 minutes. Each time the alien ships adapted faster to Concordat tactics. Each time, not a single Concordat vessel escaped to tell what had happened. The attacks spread. 7 systems, then 12, then 20. Billions of people vanished without a trace. The aliens, someone started calling them Zephyrians after the first world they hit in the Zephyr system, moved through Concordat space like a plague, consuming everything in their path. Emergency sessions of the Concordat Council began immediately. Representatives from 847 species argued about response strategies while their worlds burned. Some wanted to evacuate entire sectors. Others demanded that every available warship be sent to stop the invasion. A few suggested negotiating with the attackers, though no one had managed to make contact with them. Chen watched the reports streaming in as the New Horizons raced toward the battle zone. The Concordat fleet was the most powerful military force the galaxy had ever seen, combining the best technology and tactics from hundreds of different species. But it was being swept aside like it was nothing more than an annoyance. "Captain," Torres said quietly, "we're receiving a priority transmission from the Concordat Council." The main screen flickered to life, showing the emergency session of the Council. Representatives from dozens of species filled the great chamber, their alien faces twisted with fear and desperation. At the center podium stood Chancellor Vex, the Altarian diplomat who had led the Concordat for 15 years. "My fellow beings," Vex was saying, his normally calm voice tight with strain. "We face an enemy unlike any we have encountered. Our most advanced weapons cannot harm their ships. Our finest strategists cannot predict their movements. In the past 72 hours we have lost 43 systems and nearly 50 billion lives." Murmurs of fear and anger rippled through the assembled representatives. Chen had never seen the council in such chaos. These were the leaders who had brought peace to the galaxy, who had ended wars with words instead of weapons. Now they seemed helpless against an enemy that would not listen to reason. "We have one option remaining," Chancellor Vex continued, and the chamber fell silent. "There is one military force in the galaxy that we have not yet called upon. One species whose warships once struck fear into the hearts of their enemies." Chen felt her heart begin to pound. She knew what was coming next, but she could hardly believe it. "By unanimous vote of this emergency session," Vex announced, "the Galactic Concordat formally requests military assistance from humanity. We ask them to remember their ancient promises of mutual defense. We ask them to wake their sleeping fleets and come to our aid." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge of the New Horizons in stunned silence. After 40 years of peace, after decades of being treated as reformed warriors who had given up their violent ways, humanity was being asked to fight again. Chen stared at the blank screen, thinking of her grandfather's stories about the war titans. Somewhere in human space, old soldiers were probably reading that same message and remembering battles they had tried to forget. The question was, would humanity answer the call? And if they did, would they remember how to be the warriors the galaxy once feared? The New Horizons continued toward the battle zone, carrying its crew toward an uncertain fate. Behind them, across the galaxy, ancient machines were beginning to wake from their long sleep. Admiral Marcus Kane stood on the observation deck of Valhalla Station, looking out at the stars that had been his home for 30 years. The message from the Concordat Council lay on his desk behind him, its words burned into his memory. After 4 decades of peace, the galaxy was asking humanity to remember how to make war. Kane was 68 years old, with silver hair and scars on his hands from battles fought when he was young. He had served on the war titan Odin's Wrath during the Centauri Rebellion, had commanded destroyer squadrons in the Outer Rim campaigns, had watched human fleets break enemy lines with tactics that other species called impossible. Then the peace came and everything changed. "Sir," came a voice from behind him. Kane turned to see Commander Sarah Walsh, his chief of staff, holding a secure communication pad. "We are receiving responses from all sectors. The wake-up codes have been authenticated." Kane nodded slowly. The wake-up codes were signals that had not been sent in 40 years, automated commands that would activate systems most people thought had been dismantled long ago. All across human space, hidden installations were coming back to life. "Status report," Kane ordered, walking back. Onto his desk, Walsh consulted her pad. "Ragnar 7 reports that Hangar Complex Alpha is opening for the first time since 2347. The Odin's Wrath is beginning power-up sequences. Thor Station confirms that the Thunderstrike and Worldbreaker are ready for crew recall. Jotunheim shipyards. Reports that support vessels are being pulled out of storage." Each name brought back memories. Kane had commanded some of those ships, had served aboard others as a young officer. The War Titans were not just vessels. They were symbols of humanity's deadliest capabilities. Kilometer-long dreadnoughts that carried enough firepower to destroy entire fleets. "What about personnel?" Kane asked. "Recall orders have gone out to all retired military personnel under the age of 70, Walsh replied. "Admiral Chen is being recalled from exploration duty. General Rodriguez is returning from colony administration. Captain Harrison is being pulled from the merchant marine. The response rate is 93% so far." Kane was not surprised. Most of the officers who had fought in the last war had spent the past 40 years in civilian jobs, but they had never forgotten their training. They were farmers now, teachers, explorers like Admiral Chen's daughter. But they remembered how to command warships when the need arose. A communication alert chimed on Kane's personal console. He touched the screen and saw the face of President Angela Foster, the elected leader of the Human Colonial Alliance. Her expression was grim, but determined. "Admiral Kane," she said without preamble, "I've just finished reviewing the Concordate's request. The civilian government authorizes you to take whatever action you deem necessary. We're giving you full military authority for the duration of this crisis." Kane had expected this. The civilian government had always understood that if humanity ever went to war again, it would need to be led by military professionals, not politicians. "Thank you, Madame President. We won't let the galaxy down." "I know you won't," Foster replied. "But Marcus, the galaxy has forgotten what we're capable of. They think we've gone soft, that we've lost our edge. When they see what you're about to unleash, they're going to remember why they used to fear us. Make sure they remember that we're the good guys." The transmission ended, leaving Kane alone with his thoughts. Foster was right. The galaxy had gotten comfortable with peaceful humanity. They were about to get a reminder of what humans could do when pushed to fight. Kane activated the command console and began sending orders to the awakening fleet. The War Titans would need crews, supplies, and most importantly, intelligence about the enemy they were facing. He pulled up the reports from the Andorian sector, studying the tactical data from the destroyed Concordate fleets. The aliens, the Zephyrians, as they were being called, had technology that made conventional warfare almost impossible. Their ships could phase through solid matter, making kinetic weapons useless. They adapted to energy weapons within minutes, making those ineffective as well. They moved faster than anything in the Concordate fleet and hit harder than dreadnoughts twice their size. But Kane smiled as he read the reports. The Zephyrians had only fought Concordate forces so far, fleets that relied on energy weapons and conventional tactics. They had never faced human military doctrine, never experienced the controlled chaos that human commanders called adaptive warfare. "Commander Walsh," he called out, "get me a secure channel to Captain Zara Chen aboard the New Horizons." Walsh worked at her console for several minutes before nodding. "Channel open, sir. Captain Chen is standing by." The main screen flickered to life, showing Chen on the bridge of her exploration vessel. Kane could see the strain on her face. She had been monitoring the Concordate emergency frequencies, watching the reports of destroyed fleets and burning worlds. "Captain Chen," Kane said formally, "you are hereby reactivated to full military status with the rank of Rear Admiral. Your ship is being retrofitted for combat operations." Chen blinked in surprise. "Sir, the New Horizons is an exploration vessel. We don't have military-grade weapons or defensive systems." "You do now," Kane replied with a thin smile. Check your ship's diagnostic systems, Admiral. Your grandfather made sure that every exploration vessel in the human fleet carried hidden capabilities. Chen turned to her crew, who were already working at their consoles with expressions of amazement. Captain, called Lieutenant Torres, I'm reading massive power signatures from sections of the ship I didn't even know existed. We have weapon systems coming online, armor plating deploying from concealed compartments. This ship, it's been a warship all along. Kane nodded. Every human vessel built in the last 40 years carries hidden military systems. We told the galaxy we were building exploration ships and merchant vessels, but we never forgot that peace is a luxury that can be taken away at any moment. Chen stared at the screen, understanding dawning in her eyes. The entire exploration program was a cover operation. We weren't just mapping empty systems. We were scouting potential battlefields. Exactly, Kane confirmed. You know more about the Outer Rim than any other human officer. Your mission is to coordinate with the main fleet and provide intelligence about Zephyrian movements. But first, you're going to the Andorian sector to see what we're up against. The conversation was interrupted by an alert from Walsh. Admiral, we're receiving confirmation from Ragnar 7th. The Odin's Wrath is fully operational and ready for deployment. Captain Morrison is requesting permission to begin shakedown operations. Kane felt a surge of anticipation. Morrison had been his executive officer during the Centauri Rebellion, a brilliant tactical mind who understood human warfare better than anyone alive. If Morrison said the Odin's Wrath was ready, then humanity's most powerful warship was about to return to service. Tell Captain Morrison he has permission to begin operations, Kane ordered, and send a message to all fleet commanders. We deploy in 72 hours. Over the next 3 days, the human military machine that had been sleeping for 40 years roared back to life. The war titans emerged from their hidden hangars like ancient gods returning to the world. The Odin's Wrath, Thunderstrike and Worldbreaker took their positions at the head of battle formations that had not sailed together since the end of the last war. But it was not just the big ships that made the difference. Human military doctrine had always been based on flexibility and adaptation. Where other species built specialized vessels for specific roles, humans built ships that could fill multiple functions. Their crews trained to fight in ways that other species considered impossible or insane, ramming attacks, boarding actions, using damaged ships as kinetic weapons. The Zephyrians had adapted to conventional concordate tactics because those tactics followed predictable patterns. Energy weapons at long range, formation fighting, withdrawal when losses became unsustainable. Human tactics followed no pattern at all, changed constantly during battle, and never, ever accepted defeat as an option. Kane stood on the bridge of the Odin's Wrath as the great ship moved toward its first battle in 4 decades. Around him, officers who had been farmers and teachers just days ago worked at their stations with the precision of veteran warriors. The galaxy was about to remember why humanity had once been the most feared military force in known space. Admiral, reported. The communications officer. We're receiving a transmission from the Concordate Council. They want to know our estimated arrival time in the combat zone. Kane looked out at the stars ahead, where an alien enemy was destroying everything in its path. The Zephyrians thought they had conquered the galaxy's strongest military force. They were about to learn they had only awakened its strongest. Tell them we'll be there soon, Kane replied, and tell them to clear the battlefield. Humanity is coming home. The Zephyrian fleet hung in space like a dark cloud of death, their ships gleaming with an alien beauty that masked their terrible purpose. Admiral Vexcar commanded the invasion force from his flagship, the Eternal Silence, watching as his vessels finished consuming the last traces of the human colony on Kepler 442b. It had been almost laughably easy. The inhabitants had sent desperate messages about their families, their children, their peaceful lives. Vexcar had listened to their pleas with the cold satisfaction of a predator that had cornered its prey. The Zephyrians had no use for such weakness. They had come to cleanse this galaxy of inferior life forms, and nothing would stand in their way. Commander, reported his tactical officer, our scouts report multiple contacts approaching from the human sectors. Large vessels, possibly military in nature. Vexcar's mandibles clicked with amusement. The humans? The soft explorers who run from any sign of conflict? Let them come. We will add their ships to our collection of broken dreams. The Zephyrians had studied their enemies carefully before beginning the invasion. The Galactic Concordate relied on energy weapons and conventional tactics, following patterns that made them easy to predict and counter. The humans were supposedly the weakest of all, former warriors who had abandoned warfare for peaceful exploration and trade. Sir? The tactical officer continued. The approaching vessels are unusual. They appear to be heavily armored with weapon signatures unlike anything in our databases. Vexcar turned his attention to the tactical display. The human ships were indeed approaching, but they moved in formations that made no sense. Instead of the organized lines that Concordat fleets favored, the humans scattered across space in loose clusters, their ships weaving between asteroids and debris like they were hunting rather than fighting. Maintain defensive positions, Vexcar ordered. When they enter weapon range, demonstrate to them what happens to species that oppose us. The first human vessel to enter battle range was a massive dreadnought, with scars across its hull that spoke of ancient battles. It moved directly toward the center of the Zephyrian formation, ignoring the smaller ships that moved to intercept it. The Zephyrians opened fire with their phase weapons, beams of energy that could pass through conventional armor and tear apart molecular bonds. The beams struck the human ship and did nothing. The dreadnought's armor absorbed the impact without showing any damage. More Zephyrian ships fired, concentrating their weapons on the approaching vessel, but it continued forward, as if their most powerful weapons were nothing more than gentle rain. Impossible, Vexcar hissed. Our weapons penetrate all known armor types. What are these ships made of? His science officer worked frantically at her console before looking up with wide eyes. Sir, their armor appears to be layered with materials from dozens of different worlds. Metals, ceramics, organic compounds. It's like they built their ships to resist every type of weapon they've ever encountered. Before Vexcar could respond, the human dreadnought opened fire. But instead of energy weapons, it launched solid projectiles, chunks of metal and ceramic that moved at incredible speeds. The kinetic rounds struck a Zephyrian cruiser and punched completely through its hull, the ship exploding in a brilliant flash. Phase our ships, Vexcar commanded. Use our dimensional technology to avoid their weapons. The Zephyrian vessels began to shift, their hulls becoming translucent as they moved partially out of normal space. It was the technology that had made them invincible against Concordat fleets. Solid projectiles would pass harmlessly through phased matter. But the human weapons adapted instantly. Some of their kinetic rounds passed through the phased ships without effect, but others struck with devastating impact. Somehow, the humans had developed ammunition that could affect targets in multiple dimensional states at once. Sir, the tactical officer reported with growing panic. More human vessels are entering the battle. They're not following any recognizable attack pattern. Vexcar watched in growing alarm as human ships attacked from every angle. Some came in fast and low, using debris fields as cover. Others moved in wide arcs, launching missiles that curved through space like living things. A few actually rammed Zephyrian vessels, their reinforced hulls designed to survive impacts that would destroy conventional warships. The most terrifying thing was how the human crews fought. When a Zephyrian weapon managed to penetrate human armor, the damaged ships didn't withdraw for repairs. Instead, they pressed their attacks even harder, using their wounded vessels as weapons. One human destroyer, its hull torn open and atmosphere bleeding into space, rammed itself directly into a Zephyrian battleship and detonated its reactor core. These humans fight like madmen, whispered the science officer. They're willing to die to destroy a single enemy ship, but it was worse than that. The humans weren't just willing to die, they were winning while they died. Every suicide attack took out a Zephyrian vessel. Every desperate ramming strike eliminated a target that phase technology couldn't protect. The humans fought as if death was just another weapon to be used against their enemies. Admiral Marcus Kane stood on the bridge of the Odin's Wrath, watching the battle unfold with the calm expression of a man who had seen such chaos before. His ship moved through the Zephyrian formation like a predator among sheep, its weapons systematically destroying everything in range. Status report, he ordered calmly. Thunderstrike reports successful penetration of the enemy's left flank, came the reply from his communications officer. Worldbreaker has eliminated 6 enemy vessels and is moving to engage their command ship. Admiral Chen's task force has broken through their rear guard. Kane nodded, studying the tactical display. The Zephyrians were good. Their technology was advanced, their ships were powerful, and their tactics were sound. But they had made one fatal mistake. They had fought the Concordat fleets, which followed predictable patterns and conventional wisdom. They had never faced human military doctrine, which was based on one simple principle: win at any cost. Sir, reported his tactical officer, the enemy is attempting to adapt to our kinetic weapons. They're modifying their phase technology to defend against solid projectiles. Then we adapt faster, Kane replied. Switch to mining charges. If they want to play with dimensional physics, we'll collapse their phase fields. The human fleet changed tactics instantly, launching weapons designed for asteroid mining rather than space combat. The mining charges created gravitational anomalies that pulled the Zephyrian ships back into normal space, making them vulnerable to conventional attack. Vexkar watched his fleet dying around him, and finally began to understand what his forces had encountered. These were not the peaceful humans that intelligence reports had described. These were warriors who had spent 40 years studying every weapon, every defense, every possible threat they might one day face. They had prepared for this moment even when they claimed to want only peace. All ships retreat to phase point 7, he ordered. We must regroup, and his words were cut off as something struck the Eternal Silence's hull with tremendous force. Vexkar was thrown from his command chair as his flagship shuddered under the impact. When he looked up, he saw human soldiers in powered armor cutting through his ship's bulkheads. Boarding action, he screamed. How did they get past our shields? The answer came in the form of a human officer who walked onto his bridge wearing armor that bore the scars of a dozen battles. The woman's face was calm, almost bored, as she surveyed the alien crew with weapons trained on them. Admiral Zara Chen, Human Space Service, she announced. Your ship is now under our control. You have two choices: surrender, or we detonate. The charges my people just placed throughout your vessel. Vexkar stared at her in disbelief. Impossible. No one can board a ship during battle. The risks are too great. Chen smiled, and Vexkar saw something in her eyes that made his blood run cold. It was the look of a predator that had been pretending to be prey for far too long. You've been fighting exploration ships and merchant vessels for the last few decades, she said softly. You forgot that we used to be something much more dangerous. We used to be the species that other species had nightmares about. Around them, the battle was ending. The Zephyrian fleet, which had seemed invincible just hours before, was being systematically destroyed by human ships that fought with tactics no military academy would teach. The survivors would carry word back to their homeworld about the day they awakened something that had been sleeping in the darkness. But Chen knew this was just the beginning. The Zephyrians had sent an invasion fleet, which meant there were more of them coming. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity's 40 years of peace had not made them weak. It had given them time to prepare for a war unlike anything the universe had ever seen. The human war titans sailed through the wreckage of their enemies, their crews already planning for the next battle. After 4 decades of silence, humanity had returned to war, and they intended to win it. The Galactic Concordate Council chamber had never been so quiet. 847 species sat in absolute silence as they watched the aftermath of the battle in the Andorian sector. On the great screen that dominated the chamber, human warships moved through the wreckage of the Zephyrian fleet like giants among toys. Chancellor Vex stood at the central podium, his normally composed demeanor shaken by what they had all witnessed. The reports were still coming in, but the basic facts were clear. Humanity had destroyed an enemy force that had swept aside every concordate fleet sent against it. They had done it in less than 6 hours. The final casualty report, Vex announced, his voice barely above a whisper. The Zephyrian invasion fleet, completely destroyed. Human losses, 14 ships damaged, 3 destroyed, approximately 800 casualties. He paused, letting those numbers sink in. The enemy force that killed 50 billion of our people was eliminated with fewer losses than we suffer in training exercises. Murmurs rippled through the chamber, sounds of awe mixed with fear. Representative Korvash of the Altarian Republic stood slowly, his blue skin pale with shock. Chancellor, we must address the obvious question. If humanity possessed such military capability, why did they not reveal it during the previous 40 years? Why did they allow us to believe they had abandoned warfare? Before Vex could respond, a new voice filled the chamber. Because, Representative Korvash, we hoped you would never need to see it again. All eyes turned to the main entrance where Admiral Marcus Kane walked into the chamber wearing a human military uniform that most of the assembled beings had never seen before. Behind him came a small escort of human officers, their faces bearing the marks of recent battle. Kane approached the central podium with measured steps, and Vex stepped aside without protest. The human admiral looked out at the assembled representatives, his aged face showing the weight of decisions that had shaped the galaxy. 40 years ago, Kane began, his voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber. Humanity made a choice. We had just finished fighting the bloodiest war in galactic history. Our fleets had broken enemy lines that others called impregnable. Our soldiers had taken worlds that others said were impossible to conquer. We had become very, very good at killing things. He paused, studying the alien faces before him. Too good. We frightened our allies almost as much as we frightened our enemies. We saw what we were becoming and we decided to step back. Not because we were weak, but because we were afraid of our own strength. Representative Zalana of the Proxima Collective raised a tentacle. But Admiral, your people withdrew from military service. Your ships were decommissioned. Your colonies focused on peaceful pursuits. Kane smiled, but there was no warmth in it. No, Representative. We made you think our ships were decommissioned. We made you believe our soldiers had become farmers and teachers. We convinced the galaxy that humanity had given up its warrior nature. His expression grew serious. We did this because we understood something that the rest of you did not. Peace is not the absence of warfare. It is the presence of warriors who choose not to fight. A new voice interrupted from the chamber entrance. Admiral Kane is correct, but he's not telling you the whole story. Admiral Zara Chen entered the chamber still wearing her combat armor. Behind her walked the captured Zephyrian commander, Vexkar, flanked by human marines. The alien's exotic features were drawn with defeat, and something that looked like newfound respect. Tell them what you learned, Chen ordered the Zephyrian. Vexkar stepped forward reluctantly. When he spoke, his voice carried a tremor that had not been there during his conquests. Your human warriors fight like nothing I have ever encountered. They do not retreat when their ships are damaged, they use them as weapons. They do not surrender when outnumbered. They find ways to multiply their effectiveness. They do not follow predictable tactics. They adapt to every situation with strategies that seem impossible. He looked around the chamber, his alien eyes reflecting a kind of existential terror. But most frightening of all, they appear to enjoy combat. Not the killing, but the challenge of it. They fight as if war is a puzzle to be solved, and they take pleasure in finding solutions that others cannot imagine. Kane nodded grimly. Commander Vexakar's people sent a message to their homeworld before we destroyed their communication systems. That message contained full tactical data about human military capabilities. The Zephyrians now know that their invasion has awakened something they are not equipped to handle. Chancellor Vex found his voice. Admiral, what are you telling us, that more of these creatures are coming? Without doubt, Kane replied. The force we destroyed was a scouting fleet, sent to test our defenses. The Zephyrians have seen what Concordat fleets are capable of, and they found us lacking. But now they know about humanity, and they will come prepared for a different kind of war. The chamber erupted in panicked voices as representatives from hundreds of worlds began speaking, at once. Some demanded immediate evacuation of threatened systems. Others called for diplomatic contact with the Zephyrian homeworld. A few suggested surrendering before more lives were lost. Kane waited for the noise to subside before continuing. There is another option. The Zephyrians respect strength. It's the only thing they understand. If we show them that this galaxy is protected by warriors they cannot defeat, they may choose to find easier prey elsewhere. Representative Thurgan of the Centauri Mining Consortium stood up, his mechanical voice cutting through the murmur of conversation. You speak of we, Admiral, but humanity withdrew from galactic affairs 4 decades ago. What assurance do we have that your people will continue to protect us? Kane was quiet for a long moment, considering his words carefully. For 40 years, humanity has watched from the shadows as the Concordat built a peaceful galaxy. We have been proud of what you accomplished. You proved that different species could work together, that conflicts could be resolved without massive loss of life, that civilization could grow and flourish without the constant threat of war. He gestured toward the screen that still showed human warships patrolling the battlefield. But we also understood that peace is fragile. It requires guardians who are willing to do terrible things to protect it. We accepted that role even though it meant living with the knowledge that we are always one decision away from becoming monsters again. Admiral Chen stepped forward. The Terran Defense Compact is our proposal for a new arrangement. Humanity will provide military protection for Concordat space, but we will do so as partners, not rulers. You continue to handle diplomacy, trade, and governance. We handle the threats that diplomacy cannot resolve. And if we refuse this arrangement? Asked Representative Korvash. Kane's expression did not change, but something cold flickered in his eyes. Then you are free to face the next Zephyrian fleet with your own resources. We will withdraw to human space and protect only our own worlds. The implications hung in the air like a sword. Everyone in the chamber had seen what happened to Concordat fleets when they faced the Zephyrians. Without human military support, the next invasion would succeed. Chancellor Vex called for a recess, and the representatives gathered in small groups to discuss the proposal. Kane stood quietly at the podium, watching the political process unfold. Chen joined him, removing her helmet and running a hand through her dark hair. "Think they'll accept?" she asked quietly. "They have to," Kane replied. "The alternative is the destruction of everything they've built." He looked at the alien politicians arguing among themselves. "But they're scared of us now. They've remembered what humans are capable of when we stop pretending to be harmless." "Good," Chen said with quiet satisfaction. "Fear keeps people honest. For 40 years they forgot that civilization exists because warriors stand ready to defend it. Maybe now, they'll appreciate what we sacrifice to keep the peace." The vote, when it came, was unanimous. The Terran Defense Compact was approved by all 847 species, establishing humanity as the military arm of galactic civilization. Human warships would patrol the borders of Concordat space, and human soldiers would stand, ready to face threats that conventional forces could not handle. But the new arrangement came with conditions. Human military commanders would have final authority over all combat operations. Human weapons research would be given unlimited resources and complete secrecy. And most importantly, humanity would train select members of other species in their warfare techniques, creating a new generation of defenders who could fight as humans fought. Kane accepted the terms on behalf of his people, but as he signed the agreement, he thought about the price humanity would pay. They had chosen to be guardians, which meant they could never again be purely peaceful. There would always be another war, another threat, another reason to maintain their deadly edge. As the ceremony concluded, Kane received a message from the Outer Rim sensors. Long-range scouts had detected massive energy signatures moving toward Concordat space, the main Zephyrian fleet responding to their scouts' final transmission. The real war was about to begin. Kane looked out at the representatives who were now his responsibility to protect. They were celebrating their new alliance, confident that humanity would shield them from harm.